and welcome to Sunshine for Your Life. You know, all my life I've taught. I've been a teacher for many, many years, and I knew from an early age that I wanted to teach. It was just a passion for mine from an early age. But I also consider it to be a calling, a sacred calling, because not only do people need to learn, and they need to learn just for knowledge's sake, but they also can be helped by teaching. There are a lot of things you can teach people to help them in their personal lives, so I consider it to be a sacred calling to be a teacher and to try to help people through teaching. And I've done it for quite a while. Now, once I was teaching in high school, and there was a female student I had. It was a science class, and she was doing very poorly. Her grades were very poor. She had trouble even passing her exams. But I knew something was wrong, and I knew that she had a lot more ability than what she could show on the test. So I wasn't sure what to do for her, but I wanted to do something for her because I didn't think that the tests were accurate and the things that they were telling about her and the fact that her grades were so low. Well, one day she came into my office. Since I was also a guidance counselor at the school, I had my own office. She came in my office and she says, I want you to know that I'm going to flunk the test that you're giving me this afternoon. But I also want you to know that I know the material and I have studied. And I was so glad to see her because it gave me the perfect opportunity to work with her. And I said, you know, let's just try something. You know, I've got some time. If you have some time, let's sit down and talk. And I'm going to kind of give you the test orally. I'm going to question you just as we talk, just in general conversation, and see what you know. Because the purpose of a test is to find out if you know the material that I want you to know. And if you know that material, you should be getting a good grade on the test. So she was willing to do that. And we sat down and we talked, and I asked her questions here and there to assess what she knew about the material. As I said, it was a science class, and she did everything right. And so I said to her, congratulations, you just got an A on your test. And I got my rank book out and I put an A down for her. And she was so surprised. And what I said was, I explained to her what test anxiety was, that she had test anxiety. And what happens in test anxiety is the fact that you are so nervous about taking the test that it blocks your ability to remember the material. And so you get a poor grade because you can't answer the questions right. But if you were relaxed and you weren't worried about it, that knowledge would be readily present for you. You wouldn't have any trouble taking the test. So I explained all of that out to her. I said, now this is what I want you to do. I want you to take the test this afternoon with everybody else. Don't worry about your grade. It's going to stay an A no matter what happens. And even if you get all of them wrong, and you won't, but even if you got all the questions wrong, I'm still going to give you the A. That grade is not going to change. So what I was trying to teach her was, relax, take the test, don't worry about your grade, you already know you're getting an A, and then see what you can do on the test. And it worked. When she took the test, she was so relaxed because she didn't have to worry about a grade, and she got another A. And from that point on, she was able to bounce her grades up so they were at a very high level because she learned to relax during the test, and she was all right. I wish that I'd had the time to test all my students that way. Bring them into my office, just talk to them, see what they know, and grade them. It would have been much more relaxing for them, and I think it would have given me a more accurate picture of where they were. So at any rate, she got an A, and she continued on very high grades after that time. But it made me think about how Jesus talked to people. Jesus taught people, and he counseled people, but how did he do it? He told stories. He told parables. Parables are just stories, and they teach the truth or a moral lesson. Now, his stories were based on what people were used to, what they were familiar with in his day. Many people were fishermen or shepherds or farmers, and he talked about bread. He called himself the bread of life. He talked about catching fish and becoming fishers of men. The first scripture I'm going to have you read for you is Mark 1:17. And it's from the NIR version of the Bible, and this is what it says. Come, follow me, Jesus said. I will make you fishers of people. Let me repeat that. Come, follow me, Jesus said. I will make you fishers of people. What he was doing was working with fishermen and shepherds and housewives and all people in their ordinary walks of life. He preached and he taught people. He was not arrogant. He was not proud. I had a college professor once, this is just an aside, but his main goal in life was to show students how smart he was. You know, and he would use the biggest words possible to explain the simplest things, to the point where students refused to have him for classes because they couldn't understand what he was saying. But he took that to mean that that was proof that he was very smart, and therefore they should respect him because he was brilliant. Well, yes, he was brilliant, but he wasn't in touch with how to teach people. It wasn't important to him for them to understand. It was just important for them to know how bright he was. That's not a sign of a good teacher at all. But I've seen some pretty bad teaching, but I've also seen great teaching. Jesus taught simply. He told the truth. He explained the gospel. He healed people. He fed the 5,000. Now, we're not talking about courses that have to do like with inorganic chemistry or nanophysics or anything like that. We're talking about the kinds of things that he taught every day. How to help yourself, how to help other people, how to relate to people, and how to be like an everyday person, but care for people and behave the way that you need to behave. How to know that God loves you, how to know he's going to take care of you. These are everyday people skills that we're talking about. And this is what Jesus did. He talked to people on their level. Now, he wanted to teach everywhere. He could. He wanted to reach as many people as he could. So I'm reading another verse here, and it's going to be Mark 1:38, and I'm reading it from the NIRV version, and this is what it says. I want to go to the nearby towns. I must preach there also. That is why I have come. So I'm going to repeat that again. I want to go to the nearby towns. I must preach there also. That is why I have come. Now, this won't be on the screen, but it goes on to verse 39, and it says, so he traveled all around Galilee, and he preached in their synagogues. So he traveled around. He was like an itinerant preacher. He was like an evangelist. An evangelist teaches wherever they can in different places. They don't stay necessarily in one place. And so he was doing that. He was teaching wherever he could teach, wherever he could find people. So to understand the way that Jesus taught, you have to understand something about his character. John 11 talks about Mary and Martha, who were sisters, and they loved Jesus. And when their brother Lazarus died, they wanted Jesus to be there. Now, he didn't go there right away. He did go there, but he waited for a few days before he went. And so when he finally came, they said, if he had come sooner, their brother would not have died. And what they understood was Jesus could have healed him, and of course he could have. But he waited, and there was a purpose for that. And when he was brought to the grave, he asked where Lazarus had been laid. And when he was brought to the grave, the Bible said, and this is not on the screen, Jesus wept, the shortest verse in the Bible. The NIRV version is going to say Jesus sobbed. And then the following verse, when people said, see how he loved him. In other words, see how Jesus loved Lazarus. He sobbed at the grave. Now, Jesus knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Why didn't he go right away? They said, if you had come soon enough, he wouldn't have died. You would have prevented that, and that was true. But he had to wait, one, because he wanted people to know that he could raise people from the dead. But even then, he waited maybe 3 or 4 days before going. He took his time about it, but there's a reason for that. And the reason, I believe, is this. In that day and age, when a person died, they were not considered to be legally dead by the government until about 4 days after their actual death. When they died, yes, they died. Yes, they were dead. But according to the government, not legally. until 4 or 5 days had passed. So if Jesus had gone earlier and raised him from the dead, some cynic would have to say, oh, that's not a real miracle. After all, he wasn't legally dead, so he really was somewhat alive. And that would have diminished what he did as that major event of raising Lazarus from the dead. He didn't want to have anything detract from that, so he waited until that legal period was over, then went and raised Lazarus from the dead. He knew he was going to do that anyway. Jesus could teach groups of people on the sides of mountains, and he could teach people as individuals, and his teaching was a way to meet needs and to instruct and to help people to understand spiritual things. And I think the best teaching is the simplest that you can do. Not complicated. Now, there are some things in life that are complicated, and if you're talking about higher mathematics or physics or space travel, I mean, there are just things you have to learn because you have to learn. But when it comes to dealing with people, he tried to get on their level. He tried to be with them, and then he tried to teach them very simply so they would understand, and he always did it with compassion. Now, this won't be on the screen, but in Matthew 12:14, he was talking to a crowd, and someone said that his mother and brothers were there wanting to speak with him. So he asked the question, and he said, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? And this will be on the screen. This is his response. This is Matthew 12:50, and I'm reading it from the NIRV version. And this is what it says. Anyone who does what my Father in heaven wants is my brother or sister or mother. Let me read that again. Anyone who does what my Father in heaven wants is my brother or sister or mother. Now, what he's saying is, if you do what I want, if you do what I want you to do, you're a part of my family. If you're a believer, you're related to me. You're my sisters or my brothers. Jesus is, in a sense, our brother, isn't he? God is the Father. Jesus is the Son. And we are children of God when we believe. So he is like our brother in many respects. And so he mentions that in the scripture. You're my brothers, you're my sister, you're my mother, if you do what I want you to do, if you're believers. Now, I've taught for years, and I've seen a lot of people teach in a way that I just abhor. Teachers who want to show their students that they're so much brighter, as I mentioned before. Teachers who don't really have any compassion. You either know it or you don't know it, and I'm not going to try to give you any benefits here. You either do it or you don't do it, and sometimes the teaching can be harsh. Sometimes it can be done without feeling. Sometimes it can be done without compassion. But that's not the way that Jesus taught. And I have also seen teachers that were great. And they were really great because they were compassionate with their students. When I took that student in to talk to her, I really wanted to help her because I knew she knew a lot more than what she could reveal on the test, and I suspect it was test anxiety. But her coming in and telling me, first of all, she was courageous to do so because some students wouldn't approach a teacher and say, I know the material, but I'm going to flunk. What's that kind of thing to tell a teacher? But I was really so happy that she did, because that gave me the opportunity to step in and say, this is what I can do for you. This is how I can help you. This is what I think is wrong. And if you do this, I think you'll be a whole lot better. I wasn't going to force it. If she said, no, I can't come in and take the test orally, I wouldn't have forced it. But she was looking for help, and she wanted me to know that she really did know the material. And I recognized that anyway, because I saw her behavior in class. You get to know your students. You know, I had one student who used to fall asleep on me. Every time he was in class, he would come in fairly bright, and then suddenly he was gone. I never got angry at him. I always thought something was wrong. And finally, I approached his parents, and I said, he's falling asleep on me. And the parents were aware of that. And they said, we don't know what's wrong. He says he loves your class. We don't know why he's falling asleep. But you know what? He does the same thing at home. When he's eating his breakfast, I have to wake him up. He just keeps keeps drifting off. So I suggested that they have some blood work done for their son because there had to be an underlying cause, and they found the cause. He had an illness, and when they treated it, he was able to stay awake. Was I ever angry at him for falling asleep? No, I wasn't. You get to know your students. You get to know, you get to become a part of their lives, and I just knew something was wrong and needed to be handled, so I broached the parents with it. So, you know, I don't think parents and teachers have to be adversaries. They should be working on the same team to help the children to learn. I've seen too many teachers not work that way, but I've also seen other teachers that have done a great job. My point is, when you deal with people, you need to rely on God to help you, to help them to learn and grow. Then both teaching and learning can be very wonderful. And remember, as we go through our lives, we are going to be both teaching and learning. That never changes. During our lives, we teach and we learn, and we're going to need to continue to do so. And so our education is never over. We just need to do it in a compassionate way so we help people, and in turn, we learn by helpful teachers, and that helps us. Now, I'm going to close with a story. I actually wrote a sermon on this at one point, but it's an example of how we should treat each other. I was watching a television show, and I saw something that I thought was really nice. I saw a conversation between a football player, big, rugged in uniform, bulging muscles, very intimidating, actually huge, and a very small boy. And I think what had happened, I didn't see the whole thing, but I think what happened was this football player was talking to young children, probably about sports. And so they gave the microphone. He was probably 5 or 6, and he was quite small, and I think maybe small for his age. And he wanted to ask the football player a question. So he says, "May I ask you something?" And the football player said yes. And his question was this: how many glasses of milk do I have to drink to be big enough to play football? I love the question because I can just hear his mother saying, "You'll never be big enough to play football if you don't drink your milk." So he's going to check this out. How many glasses of milk do I really need in order to be big enough to play football? Well, the football player was very gracious, and what he did I was just really proud of. He scooched down to be more in line with the child. He towered over the child. He scooched down to try to be about the child's size, and he put his hand very, very gently on the child's stomach, and he said this: "You drink as much milk as your little tummy can hold." And I was really glad for the answer, and I was fascinated by it, because what he did was he diminished his size to face a little boy, to answer his question gracefully, and to be kind to him at the same time, and to help him to understand that drinking his milk really was important, and it would help him to grow. Somebody else might have given him a crass answer or ignored him or didn't pay any attention to him or say, "Well, drink it. If your mother says you got to drink it, you got to drink it." But he just gently put his hand on the child and said, "Drink as much milk as your little tummy can hold." He didn't answer the question directly. Who knows how many glasses of milk the child would have to drink? How would you know how tall a child would grow? He was very small. But I was just really proud of the compassionate answer that he gave. And so that's the kind of teaching we need to have. That is the kind of teaching that Jesus did. He taught very gently, calmly. He could be pointed when necessary. He didn't let anyone wander around and try to squeal out of an answer like the woman at the well did. And he riveted their attention, but he was kind and he was gracious, and he helped people to learn and grow. And that's the kind of teaching that we all should give, but it's also the kind of teaching that we all need. So I'm going to close it here. We'll be doing something else next time. Please join me then.